The whispers started the moment Zara Marlowe stepped onto the dusty main street of Glenrio, New Mexico, her hand resting protectively on the small swell beneath her worn calico dress. She had traveled 300 miles by stagecoach with nothing but a carpet bag, and the knowledge that staying in Santa Fe meant facing a scandal that would destroy what little reputation she had left. The year was 1878, and for a woman alone and with child, the frontier offered both freedom and judgment in equal measure. Zara had been engaged to a man who promised her the world, a banker's son with smooth hands and smoother lies. When she told him about the baby, he disappeared like morning mist, leaving her to face his family's wrath and the cruel gossip of society, women who had once welcomed her into their parlors. Her own parents, God-fearing folk who valued reputation above all else, had given her a choice that was no choice at all: leave or be disowned. She chose the road, hoping that in a smaller town, she might find work and raise her child in peace. The general store seemed as good a place as any to start asking about employment. Zara pushed open the door, causing a small bell to jingle overhead. 3 women stood near the counter, their conversation stopping the instant they noticed her. She recognized that look, the way their eyes traveled from her face down to her belly and back up again, taking in her lack of wedding ring and drawing their conclusions. "Good morning," Zara said, keeping her voice steady despite the familiar dread pooling in her stomach. "I am looking for the proprietor. I heard there might be work available." The oldest of the 3 women, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, sniffed audibly. "What kind of work would a girl in your condition be seeking?" "Any honest work, madam. I can keep books, I can clean, I can cook. I am not afraid of hard labor." The women exchanged glances, and one of them, a plump woman in a green dress, actually giggled behind her hand. "I imagine you are not afraid of much, conducting yourself the way you clearly have." Heat flooded Zara's cheeks, but she held her ground. She had endured worse in Santa Fe. "I am simply looking for employment. If you cannot help me, I will inquire elsewhere." "I should think Mr. Peterson would not want your sort working in his establishment," the severe woman said, her voice dripping with disdain. "We maintain certain standards in Glenrio, even if you clearly maintain none where you come from." The bell above the door chimed again, and Zara felt rather than saw someone enter behind her. The women's expressions shifted slightly, their smugness tempered by something that looked almost like caution. "Mrs. Henderson," a deep male voice said, and Zara heard the distinctive jingle of spurs as the newcomer moved closer. "I could hear your charitable Christian spirit all the way from across the street. How fortunate this young lady is to receive such a warm welcome to our town." The sarcasm in his tone was thick enough to cut with a knife. Zara turned to see a tall man in his mid-20s, dust covering his dark pants and worn leather vest. He had removed his hat upon entering, revealing brown hair that needed a trim and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. There was something about the way he carried himself, a quiet confidence that suggested he was not a man to be trifled with. "Mr. Xander," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice considerably less certain now. "We were simply explaining to this girl that perhaps Glenrio is not the appropriate place for someone of her moral character." "Her moral character," Vincent Xander repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "Strange. I thought only the Lord himself had the authority to judge such things. When did he deputize you, Mrs. Henderson?" The woman's face flushed an unflattering shade of crimson. "Well, I never. It is obvious what she is, arriving here alone and in such a state." Vincent moved to stand beside Zara, and she caught the scent of leather and sage. "What I see is a woman who had the courage to travel alone through dangerous territory, who is seeking honest work rather than charity, and who is carrying a child. That child is a blessing, not a shame, regardless of the circumstances that brought it into being." The words hit Zara like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were kind. She had not expected kindness, had armored herself against judgment and scorn, but compassion was something else entirely. Her throat tightened, and she blinked rapidly against the sudden burning in her eyes. Mrs. Henderson drew herself up indignantly. "Mr. Xander, your ranch may give you some standing in this community, but that does not give you the right to speak to your betters in such a manner." "My betters," Vincent said with a slight smile that did not reach his eyes. "If you were my better, Mrs. Henderson, you would be offering this lady a cool drink and a place to sit rather than standing in judgment. Now, if you will excuse us." He touched Zara's elbow gently, guiding her away from the women and toward the back of the store, where Mr. Peterson, a balding man with kind eyes, stood behind the counter looking deeply uncomfortable. "Mr. Peterson," Vincent said, "this is Miss Marlowe. She is new to Glenrio and looking for work. I imagine the boarding house could use help with cooking and cleaning, and I know for a fact that Mrs. Chen has been complaining about needing assistance. Might you point Miss Marlowe in the right direction?" The shopkeeper nodded quickly, clearly relieved to have a direction for the conversation that did not involve the still fuming ladies near the front. "Yes, yes, indeed. Mrs. Chen runs the boarding house 2 streets over, the white building with the blue shutters. She was just in here yesterday saying her rheumatism is acting up something fierce. I am certain she would welcome the help." "Thank you," Zara managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned to Vincent. "And thank you, Mr. Xander. You did not have to do that." "No," he agreed, settling his hat back on his head. "But those women did not have to be cruel either, and yet they chose to be. I simply chose differently." He tipped his hat to her. "Welcome to Glenrio, Miss Marlowe. I hope you will find it more hospitable than your first impression might suggest." He left before she could say anything else, the door swinging shut behind him with another cheerful jingle of the bell. Zara stood there for a moment, her heart doing something strange in her chest, before she collected herself and headed out to find the boarding house. Mrs. Chen turned out to be a tiny Chinese woman with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked Zara up and down when she appeared at the boarding house door, her gaze lingering on the visible pregnancy, but her expression remained neutral. "You need work," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, madam. I can cook and clean, and I am a quick learner. I would work hard for you." "You are with child?" "Yes, madam." "The father?" "Gone." Mrs. Chen nodded once, as if this confirmed something she already knew. "The world is not kind to women alone. I know this well. I came to this country after my husband died. People said terrible things because I did not look like them, did not speak like them. Your burden is different but no lighter." She stepped back, opening the door wider. "You will have room and board, and I will pay you a small wage. When the baby comes, we will adjust. But you must work hard, and I will not tolerate laziness or dishonesty." Relief crashed over Zara like a wave. Thank you so much. You will not regret this, I promise." "We will see," Mrs. Chen said, but there was a hint of warmth in her voice. "Come, I will show you your room, and then you can start by helping with supper. We have 6 boarders currently, all men who work various ranches or the railroad. They eat like horses and are always hungry." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out onto the street. Zara set down her carpet bag and allowed herself one moment to simply breathe. She had a place to stay, she had work, and she had survived her first encounter with the judgment of Glenrio's self-appointed moral authorities. It was more than she had dared hope for when she climbed aboard that stagecoach in Santa Fe. Over the following weeks, Zara settled into a routine at the boarding house. She rose before dawn to help Mrs. Chen prepare breakfast, spent her days washing linens and scrubbing floors, and fell into bed each night exhausted but satisfied. The work was hard, but it was honest, and she found that she preferred the aching muscles and calloused hands to the idle life she had lived in Santa Fe, where her greatest challenge had been choosing which dress to wear to which social function. The boarders were a mixed group. There was old Tom, a ranch hand who had worked cattle for 40 years and had stories that could make Zara laugh until her sides hurt. There were 2 railroad workers, brothers named Jack and Samuel, who were quiet but polite. A gambler named Rodrigo kept irregular hours but always paid his rent on time. And there was Henry, a drifter who did odd jobs around town and watched Zara with eyes that made her uncomfortable, though he never said or did anything she could specifically object to. Vincent Xander did not board at Mrs. Chen's establishment, but Zara saw him around town frequently. He owned a ranch about 5 miles outside Glenrio, raising horses that were renowned throughout New Mexico for their speed and stamina. He came into town for supplies, for the occasional drink at the saloon, and sometimes simply to check on various townspeople who seemed to rely on him for everything from settling disputes to helping repair a broken wagon wheel. Each time their paths crossed, he tipped his hat and offered a warm smile that made something flutter in Zara's chest. They exchanged pleasantries, brief conversations about the weather or how she was settling in, but nothing more. Still, Zara found herself looking for him, her eyes scanning the street whenever she walked to the general store or hung laundry in the boarding house's side yard. Not everyone in Glenrio was as hostile as Mrs. Henderson and her friends, but neither were they particularly welcoming. Zara existed in a strange limbo, not quite shunned, but not quite accepted. The men mostly ignored her situation, more concerned with whether their meals were hot and their sheets were clean. The women were another matter. Some crossed the street to avoid her. Others simply pretended not to see her. A few, like Mrs. Chen and the young schoolteacher, Miss Caroline, treated her with cautious kindness. It was Miss Caroline who invited Zara to the church social, being held to raise funds for a new schoolhouse. "You should come," she said one afternoon, when she stopped by the boarding house to drop off some mending for Mrs. Chen. "It would do you good to socialize a bit, and not everyone in this town is as judgmental as certain people." Zara hesitated. "I am not certain that is a good idea. My presence might cause problems." "Your presence will be a reminder that we are supposed to be a Christian community," Miss Caroline said firmly. She was only a few years older than Zara, with auburn hair and a stubborn set to her jaw. "Besides, Mrs. Chen is going, and she specifically said she wanted you to accompany her." When Zara looked at Mrs. Chen for confirmation, the older woman nodded. "You cannot hide forever, girl. Better to face them on your own terms." So, Zara found herself on a Saturday afternoon, wearing her best dress, which was becoming uncomfortably tight around the middle, walking with Mrs. Chen toward the church grounds where tables had been set up and the townspeople were gathering. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and she had to resist the urge to turn and flee. The reaction to her arrival was immediate. Conversations faltered, eyes turned in her direction. Zara felt the weight of their stares like physical pressure, but she lifted her chin and walked beside Mrs. Chen to the table laden with food, where they deposited the apple pies they had baked that morning. "Well," a familiar, unpleasant voice said. Zara did not have to turn to know it was Mrs. Henderson. "I am surprised you have the audacity to show your face at a church function, given your condition." "The Lord welcomes all his children, Mrs. Henderson," Miss Caroline said, before Zara could respond. "Or have you been attending a different church than the rest of us?" "Do not be impertinent, Caroline. There is a difference between welcoming sinners who repent and celebrating sin itself." "I am not celebrating anything," Zara said quietly, finding her voice. "I am simply trying to live my life and raise my child as best I can. If my presence offends you, I can leave." "That might be for the best," another woman chimed in, one of Mrs. Henderson's usual companions. "Think of the example you are setting for the young girls of this town. The example that women can survive adversity, that they can work hard and stand on their own 2 feet, seems like a pretty good example to me." Vincent's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Zara turned to see him approaching, his expression pleasant, but his eyes hard. He was dressed more formally than usual, in a clean white shirt and black vest, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who knew his place in the world and was comfortable with it. "Mr. Xander," Mrs. Henderson said, and Zara could hear the frustration in her tone. "You seem to make a habit of inserting yourself into situations that do not concern you." "When I see people being mistreated in my town, it concerns me," Vincent replied. He moved to stand near Zara, not quite touching her, but close enough that his presence felt like a shield. "Miss Marlowe is a member of our community now. She works hard, she bothers no one, and she deserves the same respect we afford everyone else." "Respect must be earned," Mrs. Henderson said primly. "And yet you expect it freely," Vincent observed. "Interesting double standard." Several people who had been watching the confrontation actually laughed at that, and Mrs. Henderson's face turned an unbecoming shade of purple. She opened her mouth, clearly preparing to deliver some scathing retort. But Pastor Williams chose that moment to step forward. "I think," the pastor said gently, "that this is a gathering meant to bring our community together, not drive it apart. Mrs. Henderson, your dedication to moral standards is noted, but perhaps we might extend grace as freely as we extend judgment. Mr. Xander, your defense of Miss Marlowe is admirable. Miss Marlowe, you are welcome here, as are all God's children." It was a diplomatic response that satisfied no one, but at least defused the immediate tension. Mrs. Henderson stalked off with her companions in tow, throwing dark looks over her shoulder, The other townspeople gradually returned to their conversations and activities, though Zara noticed many of them still glanced her way periodically. Vincent touched her elbow lightly. "Are you all right?" "I am becoming accustomed to it," Zara said, trying for a lightness she did not feel, though I confess I had hoped for a more peaceful afternoon. "Mrs. Henderson is like a dog with a bone once she decides someone has transgressed against her moral code," Vincent said. "She will tire of it eventually, especially if you do not give her the satisfaction of responding." "You keep coming to my defense," Zara observed, looking up at him. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, his amber eyes searching her face. "Because it is the right thing to do, and because I know something about being judged for circumstances beyond your control." "What do you mean?" Vincent glanced around, then gestured toward a quieter area near the edge of the church grounds, away from the main crowd. Zara followed him, curious despite herself. "My mother was Apache," he said once they had relative privacy. "My father was a rancher, a white man who fell in love with her despite the fact that such unions were not looked upon favorably, to put it mildly. They married in a small ceremony with only a few witnesses, and they faced judgment and hostility from both sides of their families." Zara's eyes widened. "I had no idea." "Most people do not. My mother died when I was 12, and my father raised me alone after that. He taught me that people will always find reasons to judge, to exclude, to make themselves feel superior by tearing others down. But he also taught me that such behavior says more about them than it does about the people they judge." "I am sorry about your mother," Zara said softly. "Thank you. She was a remarkable woman. Strong, kind, stubborn as a mule when she believed in something." He smiled slightly. "You remind me of her, actually, the way you hold your head up even when people are trying to push you down." The compliment made Zara's cheeks warm. "I am not sure I am that strong. Some days it takes everything I have just to get out of bed and face the world." "That is strength," Vincent said firmly. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, and Zara was acutely aware of his proximity, the solid presence of him beside her. She had been so focused on survival, on simply making it through each day, that she had not allowed herself to think about things like attraction or the possibility of connection. But standing here with Vincent, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun and the gentle breeze that carried the scent of sage and juniper, she felt something unfurl in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. "Would you like some lemonade?" Vincent asked, breaking the spell. "I saw Mrs. Patterson setting out a whole pitcher, and unlike her disposition, her lemonade is actually quite sweet." Zara laughed, the sound surprising her. "That would be lovely, thank you." The rest of the social passed more pleasantly. Vincent stayed near her, not hovering but present, and his presence seemed to ward off the worst of the hostility. People were less likely to make snide comments when they knew Vincent Xander was within earshot. Zara found herself relaxing, even enjoying the music when someone brought out a fiddle and impromptu dancing began. As the sun started to sink toward the horizon, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of orange and pink, Vincent walked her and Mrs. Chen back to the boarding house. "Thank you again," Zara said when they reached the front steps. "For everything. I seem to be constantly thanking you." "Then perhaps you could repay me by agreeing to let me call on you sometime," Vincent said. The words came out slightly rushed, as if he had been working up the courage to say them. "Properly, I mean. Perhaps dinner, or a walk, or whatever you would be comfortable with." Zara's heart stuttered. "You want to court me? But I am carrying another man's child." "You are carrying a child," Vincent corrected gently. "A child who will need a mother who is happy and supported, not isolated and miserable. And you are also a woman I find intelligent, brave, and fascinating. The child does not change that." "People will talk," Zara said weakly, even as part of her wanted desperately to say yes. "People already talk," Vincent pointed out with a slight smile. "At least this way we will give them something more interesting to discuss than your supposed moral failings." Mrs. Chen, who had been standing quietly on the porch, made a small sound that might have been approval. "Smart man," she said. "You could do worse, Zara." Zara looked from Mrs. Chen back to Vincent, seeing the honest hope in his eyes, the way he waited for her answer without pushing. This man had defended her when he had no reason to, had shown her kindness when she expected only judgment, and was now offering her something she had not even dared to imagine: companionship, respect, the possibility of something more. "I would like that," she said softly. "Very much." The smile that spread across Vincent's face was brighter than the sunset behind him. "Sunday afternoon, then? I will come by after church services, and we can take a walk. Perhaps have lunch if you are feeling up to it. That sounds perfect?" After he left, Zara stood on the porch for a long moment, her hand resting on her belly where the baby was just starting to make itself known, with small flutters of movement. For the first time since her whole world had fallen apart in Santa Fe, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could build something new here, something better. Sunday arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze that made the heat bearable. Zara attended church services with Mrs. Chen, enduring the stares and whispers with more equanimity than she would have thought possible. She was learning to ignore the Mrs. Hendersons of the world, to focus instead on the Miss Carolines and the Mrs. Chens, the people who saw her as a human being rather than a scandal to be gossiped about. Vincent was waiting outside the church when services ended, looking handsome in a dark suit. He offered his arm, and Zara took it, feeling the solid strength of him beneath her fingers. They walked toward the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land and the mountains rose in the distance like ancient sentinels. Vincent pointed out landmarks, telling her stories about the area, and Zara found herself laughing at his dry humor and the affectionate way he spoke about his ranch and his horses. "Tell me about yourself," Vincent said eventually. "Where did you grow up? What was your life like before Glenrio?" Zara hesitated. She had been expecting this question, but that did not make it easier to answer. "I grew up in Santa Fe. My father is a merchant, moderately successful. My mother came from what she considered a good family, and she was always very concerned with appearances and social standing." "Let me guess," Vincent said. "When you found yourself in a difficult situation, appearances became more important than their own daughter." "You are not wrong," Zara admitted. "I was engaged to a man named Charles, the son of a prominent banker. He was charming and attentive, and I believed he loved me. When I told him I was carrying his child, he looked at me like I had become something unclean. He left Santa Fe the next day, and his family claimed he had gone east on business. My parents gave me a choice between leaving quietly or being formally disowned, so I left." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. "I will never understand men who abandon their responsibilities, or families that value reputation over their own children." "It hurt," Zara said softly. "It still hurts, if I am honest. Not Charles. I realized quickly that I did not love him, not really, but my parents, my mother especially. I thought she would understand, that she would help me. Instead, she could barely look at me." "Their failure is not your fault," Vincent said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. You loved someone who turned out to be unworthy of that love. That is not a sin. It is simply bad luck." They found a place to sit on a flat rock overlooking a small stream, and Mrs. Chen had packed them a lunch of cold chicken and fresh bread. As they ate, the conversation drifted to lighter topics. Vincent told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to break horses from his father, and learning about the land from his mother's people. Zara talked about her love of reading, about the books she had devoured as a girl when she was supposed to be learning embroidery and piano. "I always wanted to see more of the world," she confessed. "I used to read travel narratives and imagine myself in all those exotic places. I never thought my great adventure would be fleeing my home in disgrace." "Life rarely goes the way we plan," Vincent observed, "but sometimes the detours lead us to better places than we would have found on the planned route." "Is that philosophical cowboy wisdom?" He grinned. "That is Vincent Xander wisdom, which is considerably more reliable than the regular kind." Zara laughed, and the sound echoed across the landscape. She felt lighter than she had in months, as if some of the weight she had been carrying had eased. Being with Vincent was easy in a way that being with Charles never had been. There was no pretense, no need to be anyone other than exactly who she was. As the afternoon wore on, they walked back toward town slowly, neither of them eager for the outing to end. When they reached the boarding house, Vincent took both of her hands in his. "I enjoyed today more than I can say," he told her. "Might I call on you again?" "I would be disappointed if you did not," Zara replied honestly. "Then I will see you soon, Miss Marlowe." "Zara," she corrected. "Please, just Zara." "Zara," he repeated, and the way he said her name made her stomach flip. I will see you soon, Zara. Over the following months, Vincent became a fixture in Zara's life. He came into town several times a week, always finding a reason to stop by the boarding house. Sometimes they walked together, sometimes they simply sat on the porch talking, while Mrs. Chen worked nearby with a knowing smile. Vincent brought her books from his father's library, wildflowers picked on his rides into town, and once, a perfectly smooth stone he had found by the river that he thought she might like. As Zara's pregnancy progressed and her belly grew more pronounced, Vincent's attentiveness never wavered. If anything, he became more solicitous, insisting she sit when she looked tired, bringing her treats that might ease her occasional nausea, and listening patiently when she voiced the fears that kept her awake at night. "What if I am a terrible mother?" she asked him one evening as they sat watching the sunset. "What if I cannot do this alone?" "You will not be alone," Vincent said quietly, "and you could never be a terrible mother. Anyone who fights as hard as you have to protect and provide for this child already loves them more than many parents ever manage." "You have so much faith in me," Zara marveled. "I do not understand why." "Because I see who you are," Vincent replied simply. "You see yourself through the eyes of people who judged you unfairly. I see a woman who has faced incredible adversity with grace and strength, who works hard every day, who treats everyone with kindness even when they do not deserve it, and who has not let bitterness make her cruel. How could I not have faith in someone like that?" Zara felt tears prick her eyes, the hormones of pregnancy making her more emotional than usual. "I think I am falling in love with you, Vincent Xander, and that terrifies me." Vincent reached over and took her hand, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. "I know I am falling in love with you, Zara Marlowe, and it terrifies me too. But some things are worth being afraid for." Their courtship became the talk of Glenrio, though the nature of the gossip began to shift. Where before the whispers had been purely judgmental, now there was an element of curiosity, even grudging approval. Vincent Xander was well respected, and if he saw something worth valuing in Zara Marlowe, perhaps there was more to her story than the obvious scandal. Not everyone was pleased, of course. Mrs. Henderson remained vocally disapproving, going so far as to corner Vincent outside the general store one afternoon to express her concerns. "That woman is using you," she said bluntly. "She needs a father for her bastard child, and you are foolish enough to fall for her act." Vincent looked at her with an expression of profound patience, the kind one might employ with a particularly slow child. "Mrs. Henderson, let me be very clear. Zara has never asked me for anything. Not money, not marriage, not even my time. Every moment I spend with her is because I choose to, because she is the finest woman I have ever known, and because I am hoping that someday she will agree to be my wife, not because she needs me, but because I need her." Mrs. Henderson's mouth fell open. "You cannot be serious. You would actually marry her?" "I would consider myself the luckiest man in New Mexico if she would have me," Vincent said calmly. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have better places to be and better people to spend my time with." He left Mrs. Henderson sputtering in his wake, and the story spread through town like wildfire. Vincent Xander, the most eligible bachelor in the territory, was planning to propose to the pregnant woman from Santa Fe. Opinion remained divided, but the balance was shifting, particularly among the younger generation, who saw something romantic in the whole situation. Vincent had not been exaggerating when he told Mrs. Henderson about his intentions. He was waiting for the right moment, wanting Zara to feel secure and settled before he added the pressure of a proposal. But as summer faded into fall and her pregnancy entered its final stages, he knew he could not wait much longer. He came into town on a crisp October afternoon when the cottonwood trees were turning gold and the air had a bite to it that promised winter was coming. He found Zara in the boarding house garden, hanging laundry despite Mrs. Chen's protests that she should be resting. "You are incorrigible," he said by way of greeting, taking the wet sheet from her hands and hanging it himself. "I am bored," Zara countered. "Mrs. Chen treats me like I am made of glass, and if I sit still one more minute, I am going to lose my mind. The baby is sitting on every organ I possess. I have not been able to see my feet in weeks, and I still have another month to go according to Dr. Harrison's calculations." Vincent finished hanging the laundry, then took her hand. "Walk with me. I promise we will not go far." Zara allowed him to lead her to a bench beneath one of the golden cottonwoods, where they sat in the dappled sunlight. Vincent was uncharacteristically nervous, and Zara noticed the way he kept adjusting his hat, setting it on his knee and then putting it back on. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I need to ask you something," Vincent said. He took both her hands in his thumbs tracing circles on her skin. "I have been thinking about how to say this for weeks, practicing different speeches, trying to find the perfect words. But the truth is, there are no perfect words for what I feel." Zara's heart started to pound. "Vincent." "I love you," he said simply. "I love your strength and your kindness and your stubbornness. I love the way you laugh and the way you stand up to people twice your size when they try to intimidate you. I love that you have been through hell and come out the other side with your compassion intact. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life loving you, supporting you, and being the man you deserve." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my mother's. My father gave it to me before he died and told me to give it to a woman who was strong enough to handle the Xander family's stubbornness and brave enough to love me despite my flaws. Zara Marlowe, will you marry me? Will you let me be a father to your child and a husband to you?" Tears were streaming down Zara's face, and she made no attempt to wipe them away. "You really want this? You want to take on someone else's child, to deal with all the gossip and judgment that will come with marrying me?" "I want you," Vincent said firmly. "All of you, including the beautiful child you are carrying. That baby is part of you, which means I already love them. And as for the gossip, I stopped caring about that the moment I met you. Say yes, Zara. Please say yes." "Yes," Zara whispered, then louder. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle and reverent, and Zara felt like she was flying and grounded all at once. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church. Miss Caroline stood as Zara's witness, and Tom, the old ranch hand who boarded with Mrs. Chen, stood for Vincent. Pastor Williams performed the ceremony, his voice warm as he spoke about love and commitment and the grace of new beginnings. Mrs. Henderson and her friends were conspicuously absent, but enough of the townspeople attended that the church was respectably full. Mrs. Chen cried openly, not bothering to hide her tears, and even some of the hardened cowboys who knew Vincent looked suspiciously misty-eyed. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, and Vincent kissed her, Zara felt the baby kick vigorously, as if celebrating along with them. She laughed against Vincent's lips, and he pulled back with a questioning look. "The baby approves," she explained, taking his hand and placing it on her belly so he could feel the movement. Wonder spread across Vincent's face. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I am your father, and I promise I am going to do my best by you and your mother." After the ceremony, they held a small reception at the boarding house. Mrs. Chen had prepared a feast, and the boarders had contributed what they could. There was music and laughter, and for the first time since arriving in Glenrio, Zara felt like she truly belonged somewhere. That night, Vincent took her to his ranch, helping her down from the wagon with exquisite care. The house was not large, but it was well built and comfortable, with a stone fireplace and wide windows that looked out over the land. Vincent had spent the past week preparing it for her arrival, adding small touches he thought she might like. "Welcome home," he said, carrying her over the threshold despite her protests about her weight. "It is perfect," Zara said, looking around at what would now be her home. Their home. They lay together that night in Vincent's bed, now their bed, wrapped in each other's arms. Vincent's hand rested on her belly, feeling the baby move beneath his palm. "Thank you," Zara whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For seeing me when everyone else just saw a scandal. For loving me when I could barely love myself. For giving me and this baby a home and a family." Vincent pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for letting me love you, for trusting me with your heart after it had been broken. For giving me a family when I thought I would spend my life alone." 6 weeks later, on a cold November night, Zara went into labor. Dr. Harrison was summoned, and Mrs. Chen arrived shortly after, taking command of the situation with her usual efficiency. Vincent paced the main room of the house, wearing a path in the floorboards, jumping at every sound from the bedroom. It was a long labor, lasting through the night and into the next day. Vincent was allowed in occasionally to wipe Zara's forehead with a cool cloth and whisper encouragement. But mostly he waited, praying to every god he could think of that both Zara and the baby would be all right. Finally, as the sun was beginning to set on the second day, he heard it, the thin, wavering cry of a newborn. He was on his feet instantly, and Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway with a smile. "You have a son," she said, "and your wife is tired but well." Vincent entered the bedroom to find Zara propped up against pillows, looking exhausted and radiant, and more beautiful than he had ever seen her. In her arms was a tiny bundle, and as he approached, she pulled back the blanket to reveal a red-faced, black-haired infant. "Vincent, meet your son," she said softly. "I was thinking we could name him Thomas, after my grandfather, Thomas Vincent Xander." Vincent sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes locked on the baby. He reached out with one finger, and tiny fingers immediately wrapped around it with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Vincent breathed. "You are both perfect." "He is ours," Zara corrected gently. "I need you to know that, Vincent. This baby is as much yours as if you were there at his conception. You chose him, chose us, when you did not have to. That makes you his father in every way that matters." Vincent felt his throat tighten with emotion. He leaned down and kissed Zara softly, then pressed a gentle kiss to little Thomas's forehead. "My family," he said, "my whole world right here in this room." The early months of parenthood were exhausting, but joyful. Thomas was a healthy baby with a powerful set of lungs and his mother's determination. Vincent proved to be a natural father, rising in the night to walk with a fussy infant so Zara could rest, changing diapers without complaint, and talking to Thomas constantly as if the baby could understand every word. The gossips of Glenrio found themselves running out of material. Vincent Xander was clearly besotted with both his wife and his son, and even the most determined scandalmongers had to admit that the little family seemed genuinely happy. Mrs. Henderson made one last attempt to stir up trouble, suggesting loudly at the general store that Vincent would surely come to resent raising another man's child. It was old Tom who shut her down, his weathered face unusually stern. "Mrs. Henderson, I have known Vincent Xander since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. I watched his father raise him with love and pride, despite the fact that some folks looked down on them for his mother's heritage. Vincent learned from the best what it means to be a real man, a real father. That boy loves that baby like his own because he is his own, in every way that counts. Now, I suggest you find something more productive to do with your time than trying to spread misery." After that, even Mrs. Henderson seemed to give up, and the whispers faded into silence. Zara became known not as the scandalous woman from Santa Fe, but as Mrs. Xander, Vincent's wife, a woman who worked hard and raised her son with love and was unfailingly kind to everyone she met. When Thomas was 6 months old, Zara received a letter from Santa Fe. It was from her mother, written in the carefully elegant script that Zara remembered from childhood. She read it with shaking hands while Vincent sat beside her, ready to offer comfort if the contents proved hurtful. The letter was brief and formal, but underneath the stiff language, Zara could read her mother's regret. Her father had passed away suddenly from a heart ailment, and in his final days, he had expressed remorse for how they had treated their daughter. Her mother wrote that she understood if Zara could not forgive them, but she wanted Zara to know that they had been wrong, that she had been wrong, and that if Zara was willing, her mother would very much like to meet her grandson. Zara set the letter down, tears streaming down her face. Vincent gathered her into his arms, letting her cry against his shoulder. "What do you want to do?" he asked when her tears had subsided. "I do not know," Zara admitted. "Part of me is still so angry at them, at her, but another part of me remembers being a little girl and feeling safe in her arms. I suppose I want to believe that people can change, that it is never too late to make things right." "Then we will invite her to visit," Vincent said decisively. "She can come here, see how we live, meet Thomas. And if she proves herself to be sincere, then we can talk about rebuilding a relationship. But Zara, you do not owe her anything. Whatever you decide, I will support you." Zara wrote back, a carefully worded letter inviting her mother to visit in the spring. The response came quickly, her mother accepting gratefully and promising to make the journey as soon as the weather permitted. When spring arrived with its carpet of wildflowers and warming temperatures, Zara stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching the road. Thomas was balanced on her hip, now a year old and babbling constant commentary about everything he saw. Vincent stood beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back in a gesture of support and solidarity. The stagecoach appeared finally, raising a cloud of dust on the road. It stopped in front of the house, and a woman descended, older than Zara remembered, but still recognizable. Her mother looked around, taking in the ranch, the mountains in the distance, and finally her daughter standing on the porch. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Zara's mother began to cry, her carefully maintained composure crumbling. "Zara," she said, her voice breaking. "Oh, my darling girl, I am so sorry. I am so very sorry." Zara descended the porch steps slowly, Thomas still in her arms. She stopped a few feet from her mother, searching her face for signs of judgment or disapproval. All she saw was regret and a desperate hope. "This is Thomas," Zara said quietly, "your grandson. And this is my husband, Vincent." Her mother looked at Thomas with wonder, then at Vincent with something that might have been gratitude. "May I hold him?" she asked hesitantly. Zara glanced at Vincent, who nodded encouragingly. She transferred Thomas to her mother's arms, watching carefully for any reaction. Thomas, being a friendly baby, grinned at his grandmother and immediately grabbed for her hat. "He is beautiful," Zara's mother whispered. "He looks like you did as a baby. Oh, Zara, I have missed so much. I was a fool, a terrible fool, and I will never forgive myself for turning you away when you needed me most." "You hurt me," Zara said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "You and Father both. You made me feel worthless and alone at the worst moment of my life." "I know," her mother said, "and I cannot undo that. Your father realized before he died what we had done, and it tormented him. He made me promise to reach out to you, to try to make amends. I should have done it sooner, but I was afraid you would refuse to see me, and I could not bear that. But you deserved an apology long before your father's death gave me the excuse to offer one." Vincent moved to stand beside Zara, his presence steadying her. "Mrs. Marlowe," he said, his tone polite but firm, "your daughter has built a good life here. She is loved and respected, and she has shown more strength and grace than most people manage in a lifetime. If you are sincere about wanting to be part of her life again, then we will welcome you. But if this is about appearances or easing your conscience, then I will ask you to leave now." Zara's mother looked at Vincent with what might have been respect. "You love her?" "More than anything in this world," Vincent confirmed. "Then she is fortunate indeed." She turned back to Zara. "I do not expect you to forgive me immediately, or perhaps ever, but I would like the chance to know you again, to be a grandmother to this beautiful boy, and to show you that I have learned from my mistakes, if you will let me." Zara looked at her mother, at the woman who had given birth to her, and then turned her away, who had valued reputation over her own child's well-being, but she also saw the genuine remorse, the understanding that she had been wrong, and the tentative hope for reconciliation. Zara thought about Thomas, about how she would move mountains for her son, how she could not imagine any circumstance that would make her turn him away. Her mother had failed her, but she was trying to make it right. That had to count for something. "You can stay for a week," Zara said finally. "We will see how it goes, but I need you to understand that Vincent is Thomas's father, not Charles, who disappeared the moment things became difficult. Vincent chose us, loved us, and gave us a home and a family. That makes him Thomas's father in every way that matters." "I understand," her mother said, "and I am grateful that you found someone worthy of you." The week that followed was not easy, but it was healing. Zara's mother proved her sincerity through actions rather than words, helping around the house, playing with Thomas, and asking genuine questions about Zara's life in Glenrio. She apologized repeatedly, not with grand gestures, but with quiet acknowledgments of the pain she had caused. On the last evening of her visit, they sat together on the porch while Thomas napped inside and Vincent tended to the horses. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. "You have a good life here," Zara's mother said. "A better life, I think, than you would have had in Santa Fe, even if Charles had done the right thing." "I know," Zara agreed. "I was miserable in Santa Fe, trying to be someone I was not, surrounded by people who valued all the wrong things. Here, I can be myself. I have work that matters, a man who loves me, and a son I adore. I am happier than I ever imagined possible." "I am proud of you," her mother said quietly. "I should have said that more when you were growing up. I was always so focused on what you should be, how you should act, that I never stopped to appreciate who you were. You are stronger than I ever was, and braver, and kinder. Your father was right to be disappointed in us. We failed you when you needed us most. But you are here now, Zara pointed out. That counts for something. They parted the next morning with an agreement to write regularly and a tentative plan for Zara, Vincent, and Thomas to visit Santa Fe in the fall. It was not a complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning, and Zara found that she was content with that. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered under Vincent's careful management, and Zara discovered she had a talent for training horses, particularly the young ones who needed a gentle hand. Thomas grew from a baby into a rambunctious toddler who followed his father everywhere, his dark hair and bright eyes drawing comments about how much he resembled Vincent. When Thomas was 2 years old, Zara told Vincent she was pregnant again. He whooped with joy, swinging her around carefully despite her protests, and then spent the evening talking to her still flat belly about all the adventures they would have. "Another baby," Vincent said that night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her stomach. "Do you know, when I was younger, I never thought I would have a family. I convinced myself I was content being alone, that I did not need anyone else. And now I have you and Thomas and another little one on the way. I feel like the wealthiest man alive." "We have been blessed," Zara agreed. "I think about where I was 2 years ago, how lost and scared I felt, and then I look at where I am now. If someone had told me back then that I would end up in Glenrio, married to a horse rancher, and happier than I ever dreamed possible, I would never have believed them." "Life has a funny way of working out," Vincent mused. "All the pain and struggle led us here, to each other. I would not change a thing." Their daughter was born the following spring, a tiny girl with Zara's delicate features and Vincent's amber eyes. They named her Anna Marie, and Thomas was instantly smitten with his baby sister, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to bath time. Mrs. Chen came to stay for a week after Anna was born, helping around the house and cooing over the baby. "You have made a good family," she told Zara one afternoon. "When you first came to Glenrio, I saw a frightened girl trying to be brave. Now, I see a woman who knows her own strength." "I learned from you," Zara said warmly. "You showed me that kindness and strength are not opposites, that you can be both compassionate and tough." "And you have shown others the same thing," Mrs. Chen replied. "Miss Caroline was telling me that several young women in town have come to her recently, facing difficulties, looking for advice. She sends them to talk to you because you understand what it is like to face judgment and come through it. You have become a source of strength for others." Zara had not realized, but she supposed it was true. Over the past year, she had found herself counseling young women facing various challenges, offering them the support and understanding she had needed so desperately when she first arrived in Glenrio. It felt good to give back, to use her own painful experiences to help others navigate theirs. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Thomas grew tall and strong, learning to ride and rope alongside his father. Anna proved to have her mother's love of books and her father's stubbornness. When Thomas was 6 and Anna was 4, they were joined by another brother, a boy they named Samuel after Vincent's father. The ranch expanded, Vincent's reputation for breeding excellent horses, bringing buyers from across the territory. Zara managed the business side of things, her mind for numbers and organization proving invaluable. Together, they built not just a home, but a legacy. Mrs. Henderson grew old and cantankerous, but even she had to admit that she had been wrong about Zara Marlowe, or rather, Zara Xander. The woman she had judged so harshly had become one of the most respected members of the community, known for her kindness, her business acumen, and her beautiful family. Zara's mother became a regular visitor, arriving each spring to spend time with her grandchildren. The relationship between mother and daughter would never be what it might have been had things been different, but it was genuine and affectionate in its own way. Zara had learned to forgive, though she had not forgotten, and her mother had learned to accept her daughter for who she was, rather than who she wanted her to be. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Zara back to the spot where they had their first real conversation, the flat rock overlooking the stream. The children were spending the day with Mrs. Chen, giving them rare time alone. "Do you remember what I told you that first day at the general store?" Vincent asked as they sat together, watching the water flow past. You said that child is a blessing, not a shame, Zara recalled. I remember thinking you were either incredibly kind or completely insane. Vincent laughed. Maybe a bit of both, but I meant it, Zara. Thomas is a blessing. You are a blessing. This whole life we have built together is more than I ever dared to dream. I love you, Zara said, leaning her head on his shoulder. I loved you then, though I did not know it yet, and I love you now more than I can say. You saved me, Vincent, not because you married me or gave Thomas a name, but because you saw me as a person worthy of respect and love when everyone else saw only shame. You gave me back myself. You saved me too, Vincent replied. I was going through the motions of living, working the ranch, existing but not really being alive. Then you walked into that general store, scared but trying not to show it, and something in me woke up. You made me want to be better, to do better, to build something that mattered. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the birds and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Finally, Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. I had this made for you, he said, handing it to her. An anniversary present. Zara opened the box to find a delicate silver locket. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of Vincent and one of their 3 children. On the other side was an engraving that read, "From judgment to joy, from shame to belonging, my heart always. V." Tears filled Zara's eyes as she traced the engraving with her finger. It is beautiful. Thank you. Vincent fastened the locket around her neck, his fingers gentle against her skin. Thank you for saying yes when I asked you to walk with me all those years ago. Thank you for trusting me with your heart. Thank you for giving me the family I never thought I would have. Thank you for seeing me, Zara whispered, for standing up for me when no one else would, for loving Thomas as your own, for building this life with me. They kissed as the sun warmed the land around them. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. Zara thought about the frightened woman who had stepped off that stagecoach in Glenrio a decade ago, alone and pregnant and certain her life was over. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that everything would be all right, that pain was not permanent, and that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. But she could not go back, and that was fine. She had her present and her future, filled with a man who loved her fiercely, children who brought her joy, and a community that had eventually accepted her. The whispers and judgment that had seemed so overwhelming a decade ago had faded into insignificance, replaced by the quiet contentment of a life well lived. As they walked back to the ranch hand in hand, Zara touched the locket at her throat and smiled. From judgment to joy, the engraving read, and it was the truest thing she knew. The child that had been called a shame was now a bright, loving boy who brought light to everyone who knew him. The woman who had been laughed at was now respected and valued, and the cowboy who had defended her honor that first day had become her husband, her partner, and the love of her life. Years continued to unfold with the gentle rhythm of seasons changing. Thomas, at 16, had grown into a fine young man with his father's work ethic and his mother's compassion. He had Vincent's knack for horses and had started breaking and training the young colts himself, showing a patience and understanding that made even the most skittish animals trust him. Zara watched him sometimes and marveled at the young man he had become, knowing that Vincent's influence had shaped him into someone kind and strong. Anna, at 14, had become something of a scholar, devouring every book she could get her hands on and dreaming of becoming a teacher like Miss Caroline, who had retired the previous year. She helped her younger brother Samuel with his lessons and talked endlessly about wanting to make a difference in the world. Vincent indulged her dreams, ordering books from back east and encouraging her to pursue her education. Samuel, at 10, was the wild one, always climbing trees or exploring the arroyos, coming home covered in dust with stories about the adventures he had imagined. He reminded Zara so much of the stories Vincent told about his own childhood that sometimes it made her laugh. The ranch had prospered beyond their initial hopes. Vincent's horses were sought after throughout New Mexico and beyond, and they had expanded their holdings to include more land and hired several hands to help manage the work. Zara had proven herself a shrewd businesswoman, negotiating contracts and managing their finances with skill that surprised even her. On a warm summer evening, the whole family gathered on the porch after supper, as was their custom. Thomas was entertaining his younger siblings with a story about a particularly stubborn mare he had been working with, making them laugh with his exaggerated impressions of her refusal to cooperate. Vincent sat with his arm around Zara, watching their children with an expression of profound contentment. "Did I ever tell you," he said quietly, "that my father once told me the measure of a man is not what he accumulates, but what he leaves behind?" "No," Zara replied, studying his face. "What brought that to mind?" "Just watching them," Vincent said, gesturing to the children. "Thinking about what we have built here. It is not just the ranch or the business. It is them, these three amazing people we are raising. It is the example we have set, showing them that love is a choice you make every day, that family is not just blood, but commitment and care. That is what we will leave behind, and I cannot imagine a better legacy." "We have done well," Zara agreed softly. "Despite everything, despite the judgment and the hardship, we have built something beautiful." Thomas looked over at them, interrupting his own story. "Are you two getting sentimental again?" he teased, but his tone was affectionate. "Maybe," Vincent admitted with a grin. "Is that a problem?" "Not at all," Anna chimed in. "I think it is sweet how much you two still love each other. Sarah at school says her parents barely speak to each other anymore, but you two are always holding hands and smiling." "That is because we choose to be partners," Zara explained. "Marriage is not always easy, and there are days when we disagree or frustrate each other. But we always come back to the choice to love, to support, to work together. That is what makes it last. Plus, your mother is the most beautiful, intelligent, stubborn woman I have ever met," Vincent added. "How could I not love her?" Samuel made a face at the mushiness of it all, but he was smiling, and Zara knew that these moments, these conversations, were shaping her children's understanding of what love should look like. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Zara and Vincent remained on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The cicadas sang their evening song, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if things had gone differently?" Vincent asked. "If Charles had been an honorable man and married you?" Zara considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I do not think I would have been happy. I did not love him, not really. I loved the idea of what he represented, the security and status. But there was no real connection, no partnership like what we have. I would have lived a comfortable but empty life. And if you had never gotten pregnant, if you had stayed in Santa Fe, then I never would have come to Glenrio," Zara said. "Never would have met you, never would have found out who I really am beneath all the expectations and restrictions. In a strange way, having Thomas save me, it forced me to be brave, to stand on my own, to discover my own strength. I would not change it, Vincent. Not a single moment, because every step led me here, to you, to this life we have built." Vincent pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I am glad you feel that way, because I would not change anything either. Even the hard parts, the judgment and the gossip, they were worth enduring because they brought us together." They sat in comfortable silence, both lost in their thoughts. Zara touched the locket she still wore every day, the silver warm from her body heat. She thought about that first day in Glenrio, how certain she had been that her life was over, that she had nothing left but shame and struggle. She had been so wrong. The years had taught her that endings could be beginnings, that shame could transform into pride, and that judgment could give way to respect. She had learned that love was not about perfection, but about choosing someone every day, flaws and all. She had discovered strength she never knew she possessed, and found a family not just in Vincent and their children, but in the community that had eventually embraced her. As she sat there with Vincent's arm around her, and the sounds of her sleeping children drifting from inside the house, Zara felt a profound sense of gratitude. For the cowboy who had defended her when she needed it most. For the community that had given her a second chance. For the child who had been called a shame, but was truly a blessing. For every moment of joy and struggle that had led her to this place, this life, this love. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Vincent asked. "For everything. For being exactly who you are. For loving us the way you do. For building this life with me." "Always," Vincent promised, and Zara knew he meant it. Not just for tonight or tomorrow, but for all the tomorrows to come. The ranch would continue to prosper. The children would grow and eventually build their own lives, though they would never stray far from the values their parents had instilled. Thomas would take over the horse breeding operation, expanding it even further. Anna would indeed become a teacher, opening a school in Glenrio that would serve generations of children. Samuel would become a rancher like his father, his wild energy channeled into building his own successful operation. But that was all yet to come. For now, there was just this moment, this perfect evening with the stars overhead and the man she loved beside her. Zara leaned her head on Vincent's shoulder and closed her eyes, listening to the steady beat of his heart and feeling the peace that came from knowing she was exactly where she belonged. The story of the woman who had been laughed at for her pregnancy had become a love story, a tale of redemption and second chances. The cowboy who had said that child is a blessing, not a shame, had proven his words true, not just in that moment, but every day since. And the family they had built together stood as testament to the power of choosing love over judgment, compassion over cruelty, and hope over despair. In Glenrio, New Mexico, in the year 1888, as the territory stood on the cusp of statehood and the Wild West began its transformation into something new, the Xander family lived there happily ever after. Not because their life was perfect or without challenges, but because they faced everything together, bound by love that had been forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by years of choosing each other every single day. And that, Zara thought as she drifted off to sleep that night with Vincent's arms around her, was the best ending she could have ever hoped for.